So are performance brakes actually worth it? Do you notice a difference when you apply performance brakes to your car? There's a lot of conflicting information around out there concerning brake upgrade kits and what works and what doesn't work and how they work. We pretty much in all of our videos advocate some kind of brake improvement. We often recommend improving the pads or increasing the size of the discs. But why do we do this? What's the overall effect on the braking performance of your car? And is it actually worth you going out and buying a brake upgrade for your car? So the brakes are huge metal discs. They use brake pads that apply friction to the discs. This obviously creates a lot of heat which needs to be dissipated, but the overall effect of all of this drag is reducing the kinetic energy of the car. So effectively, you're converting that kinetic energy into friction and heat. The limitation is always with the grip of the car. You cannot outbrake the grip of the car. So if you've got rubbish tyres, really thin, skinny tyres, or you're on a low grip surface, it doesn't matter what you do to your brakes, it's not going to make any difference whatsoever to how the car actually stops. So is it actually worth getting a big brake upgrade kit? Well, for most people, it's probably not worth the investment, but there is an advantage that you get from having a larger surface area on the brake disc and a larger surface area on the brake pad. You have more control over the braking. With small brake discs, as soon as you apply the brakes and achieve that lockup of the wheel, the ABS kicks in, and when that does, it backs off the braking. So you actually lose a bit of the braking effect while the ABS is pulsing on and off. That's just the way an ABS brake system works. I should also state that a lot of braking systems, the ABS particularly, will get very confused if you've applied substantial upgrades to the braking ability of the car. So it's certainly worth doing a little bit of research, finding out from others who have had this mod done on the same model of car as you, and whether they've encountered any problems with the ABS setup and how this can be adjusted. It may just be a simple replacement of the ABS system. It might just be a change that can be made to the ECU of the car that controls that aspect of the braking. But it's certainly worth investigating and not getting caught out. The last thing you want is to apply massive brake upgrades and expensive brake upgrades to your car only to find it's not effective, or you should have upgraded the servo or other components within the braking system to make it work. But with a larger brake disc, now most people who've had these fitted can testify to this fact, you will have a lot more feel. The stopping power of the car will feel better because you've got more control over it. The pedal movement has a greater degree of variance on the car's momentum and reduction in the momentum. So physically, you're probably not stopping any more quickly than you would with a conventional brake system, but you get a lot more control. And the other advantage you get from upgrading your brake system is those brakes stay effective for much longer. So when you're on the road, the brakes never really get particularly hot. You're using them in little bursts to slow you up at junctions, and you're not doing very heavy braking. But when I see cars going out on the track, the most common reason for them to come off the track and sacrifice their track time is because their brakes have started to fade. So as the brakes exceed their operating temperature, the pads get warm, the discs get very warm and start glowing. They stop giving you that effective stopping power, and you experience that brake fade, which can be quite scary, especially at high speeds. So upgrading the brakes is certainly a good idea if you are often running into that brake fade limit. You're overusing the brakes and you're starting to experience a deterioration in the braking. So brake upgrade kits can certainly make sure that you are braking more effectively for longer periods of time during heavy periods of braking and driving. Focus also on the pads that you choose. So the pads will have an operating temperature where they are at their most optimum. They provide a good bite at that optimum temperature. Now with race pads, they require a bit of heat. They're designed to operate at the much higher temperature ranges than your road pads. So on the track, that's really what you need. You need those pads to be operating at that hot range and giving you as much braking power as possible. On the road, they start off really, really cold. And because they are cold, they don't bite straight away. It will take a fraction of a second for them to warm up to their operating temperature on the road. But that fraction of a second can cost you your braking distance. So some high performance pads can actually be quite dangerous when they are fitted on a road car. So we really implore all of our viewers and readers to think about the conditions in which you use the car and choose performance parts that are appropriate to those conditions. So road pads on a track cause a problem because they will just get too hot and start to fade. Performance pads on the road will generally not be in their operating temperature most of the time, so there will be a slight delay before they start kicking in. They can also be a lot more noisy than conventional pads and create a lot more brake dust. So there are also considerations that you make, and maybe compromises you have to decide on whether you actually want the improvement in the braking on the performance environment, and you can live with that in your domestic drive. So when it comes to the brake disc itself, think also of the design and structure of the brake disc. So we've seen drill discs which effectively have little holes in, which aid the cooling effect and help keep those discs in their operating temperature for longer periods of time. We've seen discs with grooves cut into them, which is a good idea because that helps to remove the gases that build up between the pad and the disc when they start getting really hot, and it helps keep the pads nice and sharp. So as the pads move over these grooves, it just creates a little bit of extra friction, and that can certainly improve things. And we've seen vented discs where the disc has actually got a little channel in between which allows a flow of air, which improves the cooling effect of the brake disc because you've got additional surface area. You've not just got the front and back, you've got a front and back on both sides, and that channel in the middle that's keeping everything cool and within its operating temperatures. So look out for some of the cheaper discs. We've seen drilled discs that have actually started to crack. So where the metal has been drilled, it's created stress points within the metal, and with the constant heat and cooling, expansion and contraction that goes on, it can cause that metal to degrade, and we have seen these brakes actually crack. So never cheap out when you're buying brake discs. Always go with a quality brand that provide a good quality product that is machined properly, and just check that it is certified for road use. A lot of the off-road brake discs have just never been tested. They're often of a lower grade material, and they say it's off-road use just because it wouldn't be legal to use these untested dangerous brakes on the road. So don't get caught out when you're buying brake discs. So the brake fluid you choose also makes a bearing on the effectiveness of your braking system. That fluid can actually get quite hot with the heavy braking. It's in contact with the brake discs effectively through the calipers, and as heat builds up at those brake pads and on the discs, that heat will transfer. So if you've got a poor quality brake fluid, that can actually cause it to boil if it's got fluid building up in it and air bubbles, and that can create a very spongy brake feel. So your brake fluid actually needs to be changed regularly. Most manufacturers specify the change interval in the schedule, but you can actually test your brake fluid and just see how much water is in it, what the quality is of that brake fluid. And you can buy race spec brake fluids that are less hygroscopic, so that is where they would absorb water from the atmosphere and the air and just moisture around them. So if you keep it sealed up, it's not a big problem. But because brake fluid is hygroscopic, every time you open the cap, there's a risk there for the moisture in the air to start collecting in that brake fluid itself. Braided brake hoses take the standard rubber hoses and they put a little mesh of metal on the outside. That can prevent those brake hoses from stretching under braking. So there's a lot of pressure going on in there. And obviously if that hose is flexing like a balloon, you are losing some of that braking pressure and some of that braking feel. So if you are replacing brake lines and brake hoses, it's certainly a good idea to get performance oriented replacements because they will often last longer than the standard OEM ones, and they have that added benefit of not degrading when they get hot or when you're pushing them to the extremes in a performance environment. So thanks for watching. I hope this has just cleared up some of the myths that are around brakes. Brake upgrades are still a good idea, but generally they won't stop the car any quicker. They will allow the car to stop quickly for longer durations of heavy use, and they'll last longer, and good pads and good discs will cut in and give you a more progressive feel, giving you a lot more control over your car while you are actually braking. So there's lots of plus points to having a decent brake upgrade on your car. So I hope this video has been useful to you. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. We would love you to stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next video.